The American Civil War did not begin with one single gunshot. It began long before the first cannon roared at Fort Sumter. It began in whispers, in broken promises, in rising tension, in a nation built on freedom, yet chained by slavery. It began with a contradiction so powerful that it slowly tore the United States of America apart from the inside, until the only way forward was through war. When people imagine the American Civil War, they often picture battlefields filled with smoke, thousands of soldiers charging with flags in their hands, and dramatic speeches about unity and freedom. But the truth is much deeper, and much darker. Because the Civil War happened not simply because of one election, or one disagreement, or one moment of rebellion. It happened because America had been walking toward this explosion for nearly a century, and eventually, the fuse reached the powder. To understand how the American Civil War actually happened, we must go back to the beginning, back to the founding of the United States itself. The United States was born in 1776, declaring all men were created equal, and that liberty was the natural right of every person. But right alongside that revolutionary ideal existed the brutal reality of slavery. Enslaved African people were treated as property, sold like objects, beaten, raped, chained, and forced into labor that built wealth for southern plantations and northern industries alike. From the very start, America's greatest dream carried within it America's greatest sin. And the founding fathers knew it. Many of them were slaveholders themselves. They feared slavery would destroy the nation, but they also feared losing the support of the southern states. So instead of solving the problem, they postponed it, compromised, and buried the conflict under political agreements, hoping future generations would deal with it. But slavery could not be buried forever. As the United States expanded westward in the early 1800s, the question became unavoidable. Asterisk asterisk, will new states be free or slave? Asterisk asterisk, every new territory meant a new battle over power in Congress. Because in America, political power was tied to state representation, and representation was tied to population. And in the South, slavery inflated political influence through the Three-Fifths Compromise, which counted enslaved people as partial population for representation, while giving them absolutely no rights. This meant the Southern elite had greater power to protect slavery, even though enslaved people themselves had no voice. By the 1820s, the tension was boiling. The first major attempt to contain the crisis was the Missouri Compromise of 1820 ***. Missouri wanted to join the Union as a slave state. The North was furious, fearing it would expand slavery's reach. The South insisted it had the right to keep slavery. The solution was a bargain. Missouri would enter as a slave state, but Maine would enter as a free state, keeping the balance. And slavery would be banned north of a certain latitude in future territories. People celebrated it as peace. But it was not peace, it was merely a pause. A temporary bandage on a wound that was infected and growing. As decades passed, the North and South began to become two completely different societies. The North industrialized rapidly, building factories, railroads, cities, and immigrant labor forces. The Southern economy, however, became even more dependent on plantations, cotton, tobacco, sugar, and those plantations depended on enslaved labor. The invention of the cotton gin made cotton production explode, and suddenly slavery wasn't shrinking, it was expanding. Cotton became king, and slavery became the engine that fueled it. Leaders argued slavery was not just necessary, it was moral. They claimed it was a positive good. They feared the North would eventually outlaw it. But more than that, they feared losing control. Because slavery wasn't just an economic system, it was a social order, a structure of racial dominance. Ending slavery meant destroying the entire foundation of elite Southern power. Meanwhile, the North began to change morally and politically. The abolitionist movement grew. Voices like Frederick Douglass, Harriet Tubman, William Lloyd Garrison, and Sojourner Truth exposed slavery's horrors and demanded its end. Newspapers published stories of brutality. Former enslaved people described whippings and families torn apart. Americans could no longer pretend slavery was someone else's problem. It was a national crime. And the pressure intensified. Then, everything accelerated in 1850. That year, America faced another major crisis after winning new lands from the Mexican-American War. Those lands, including California, raised the same terrifying question again: free or slave? The result was the Compromise of 1850, another desperate attempt to prevent civil war. California entered as a free state, upsetting Southern balance. In return, the South got something even more powerful: This law forced northern states to assist in capturing runaway enslaved people, even those who had reached free territory. It allowed slave catchers to hunt human beings in northern streets, dragging them back south. And it punished anyone who helped fugitives. This law shocked the North. People who had previously been indifferent now saw slavery invading their homes, their cities, their morality. Suddenly, slavery wasn't just a Southern problem, it was a national invasion. Northern citizens resisted. Some formed underground networks to protect runaways. Others openly protested. Violence erupted. Trust between North and South collapsed further. And then came the moment that truly shattered the fragile balance, the Kansas-Nebraska Act of 1854. This act allowed settlers in Kansas and Nebraska territories to decide for themselves whether slavery would be allowed. It essentially erased the Missouri Compromise line. It opened the door for slavery's expansion. The result was chaos. Pro-slavery and anti-slavery settlers flooded Kansas, each side trying to control the vote. The territory turned into a war zone. Houses were burned. People were murdered. The period became known as Bleeding Kansas. It was a preview of what was coming for the entire nation. In this same atmosphere, the abolitionist John Brown took radical action, killing pro-slavery settlers in Kansas. To many Northerners, he was a hero resisting evil. To Southerners, he was a terrorist. The divide was no longer political. It was emotional, personal, and increasingly violent. Then came another explosion, the Supreme Court decision in Dred Scott v. Sanford in 1857. Dred Scott was an enslaved man who sued for his freedom, arguing that living in free territory made him free. But the Supreme Court ruled against him in one of the most infamous decisions in American history. The court declared that black people were not citizens, had no rights the government was bound to respect, and that Congress had no authority to ban slavery in territories. It was a victory for the South and a nightmare for the North. Many Northerners saw it as proof that slavery would be legalized everywhere, that no place was safe, that the entire nation was being hijacked by slave power. Now the country was no longer divided by debate, it was divided by fear. Then, in 1859, John Brown struck again, this time attacking the federal arsenal at Harper's Ferry, hoping to spark a slave uprising. The attempt failed. Brown was captured. He was executed. But his final words turned him into a martyr in the North. In the South, it confirmed every nightmare, that abolitionists would stop at nothing, that they were coming. And that slavery would only survive if the South took drastic action. 60. The United States was now a powder keg. All it needed was a spark. Starting in December 1860, Southern states began to secede from the Union. South Carolina was first. Then Mississippi, Florida, Alabama, Georgia, Louisiana, and Texas followed. They formed a new nation, the Confederate States of America, led by Jefferson Davis. They wrote a constitution and made something very clear. Slavery was not a side issue. It was central. It was the reason. North, meanwhile, was stunned. Lincoln had not even taken office yet. But the Union was breaking apart. The federal government faced a terrifying question: can states leave the Union whenever they want? If yes, then America was not a nation. It was merely an agreement, easily abandoned. Lincoln refused to accept that. He believed the Union was permanent. And he believed allowing secession would destroy democracy itself. But the situation was about to turn into war. In Charleston Harbor stood Fort Sumter, a U.S. military fort controlled by Union forces, surrounded by Confederate territory. The Confederates demanded the fort surrender. The Union refused. On April 12, 1861, Confederate cannons opened fire. The sky filled with smoke. The earth shook with explosions. And as the shells slammed into Fort Sumter, America crossed the line. This was the beginning of the Civil War. No one truly expected what came next. Both sides believed it would be short. The Union believed the South would be quickly crushed. The Confederacy believed the North lacked the will to fight. But they were wrong. Horribly wrong. The war lasted 4 years. Over 620,000 soldiers died, some estimates even higher. Entire cities were destroyed. Families were shattered. The nation was traumatized. It was the bloodiest conflict in American history. And as the war dragged on, its meaning transformed. At first, the Union fought to preserve the nation. The Confederacy fought to preserve slavery and independence. But as the years passed, slavery became impossible to ignore. enslaved people fled to Union lines. They forced the issue. They showed the world that they were not passive victims. They were active agents of freedom. Lincoln began to understand that the war could not truly be won without addressing slavery directly. In 1863, Lincoln issued the Emancipation Proclamation declaring enslaved people in Confederate states were free. It did not immediately free everyone, but it changed everything. It transformed the war into a fight not only for Union, but for liberation. Black soldiers joined the Union Army. Nearly 200,000 served. They fought not just for a flag, but for their own humanity. Their courage helped win the war. Their sacrifice helped rewrite the meaning of America itself. Finally, in April 1865, the Confederacy collapsed. General Robert E. Lee surrendered to General Ulysses South Grant at Appomattox Courthouse. The war was over, but the pain would last for generations. The American Civil War happened because slavery was allowed to exist in a nation that claimed liberty. It happened because compromises delayed justice. It happened because political power protected oppression. It happened because people refused to let go of wealth built on human suffering. And it happened because eventually, the truth could no longer be postponed. The Civil War was not inevitable from the start, but once America chose comfort over justice again and again, war became the price. And even today, the echoes of that war remain. In debates about race, identity, equality, and history. Because the Civil War was not only about the past, it was about the soul of America. It was the moment the nation faced its deepest contradiction, and paid for it in blood.